Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, and you're listening to MMA Latest News.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Latest. I'm here with Reese, and we're here to recap UFC Vegas 7. Reese, wasn't the best card on paper, but it certainly delivered, didn't it?
It did. I think over the last few months, especially, we saw these cards that haven't been amazingly stacked on paper, but they turn out to be some of the best in terms of the most entertaining fights. And we do always get the card after a pay-per-view to be a little bit on the down low. But as you said, it really was a good action of fights, all sorts of different sort of finishes, whether that be a submission or a couple of really, really nice knockouts. So it was a nice end to the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. It was whittled down to a 9-fight card in the end. And sometimes, to fans, the 12, 13-point fights can pacing-wise be a bit difficult, especially when we're up at 4 or 5 in the morning, going on to 7 for pay-per-views. But a 9-fight card this weekend, it paced very well. What did you make of it?
I think it did pace well, considering we had 3 fights drop out over the space of 48 hours. We even had the one drop out on fight day, so that always is an issue. I think when you have that many have that little fight, that you've got to wonder how the broadcast team will pace it out. But I thought I did a really good job. I thought I give each fighter in every fight a little bit of showtime on the screen as well, a little bit of the backstory here and there. So I was really happy with it.
Definitely. Now, obviously, the biggest talking point was Frankie Edgar making his bantamweight debut. We had some questions about his chin, about his durability. He proved all those doubters wrong in his fight against Pedro Munhoz, who brought the dog out in him, really. It was a hard battle. I was expecting at points, Frankie Edgar was winning the rounds. I was expecting something like Cody Garbrandt to happen, where Pedro Munhoz is dangerous and it only takes one punch for him to get the victory. But Frankie Edgar really pulled through, showed his heart, showed his experience. What did you make of Edgar in the bantamweight division this weekend?
Yeah, as we said on the preview, we all know what Frankie Edgar is about. He's been in some absolute wars and some great fights, especially the 3 fights with Gray Maynard. He's been in some incredible fights. So I think we both predicted that Munhoz would get the win. So, but as you said, they brought the dog out on each other, and it was a fantastic fight. And I think that the fight was brought up to Frankie's level. Obviously Frankie, in terms of being a mixed martial artist, is a far better fighter overall. And I think Munhoz brought his game up to match that of Frankie's, and I think that was why it was such a good fight. In terms of online and in the community, it was very split who won it. I think I had Frankie winning it 3-2, but it's one of those where it could have gone to Munhoz 4-1 even, or 3-2. I don't think anyone would have really moaned about it, but I was very impressed with Frankie Edgar against a top 5 guy like Munhoz. And with that win, it puts him right up in the title mix already.
Yeah, 100%. And, we said so many times that this division's an absolute shark tank and it's got killers in it. And the fact that Frankie Edgar's coming with his first fight and obviously beat, as you said, a top 5 contender. Obviously, rankings come out tomorrow. You'd expect him to be in the top 10. Whether he skips ahead, Munhoz probably drops maybe 2. Who do you see him going maybe against next? Is it Dominic Cruz or Jose Aldo? Or is it Corey Sandhagen, who is supposed to fight back in January?
I think that would be the sensible option. I think that's the way that UFC would probably favour it. Is that, look, this is a fight that we had booked anyway, so it didn't play out. But let's just run that one back almost. So, all the guys you just mentioned are just coming off a fight as well. They all don't have fights coming up, so he really does have a lot of options. I think another name to add to that list is Rafael Sancho as well. As we mentioned on that pay-per-view a few months back, we had like a mini bantamweight tournament, didn't we? So he's got loads of options. He really has. In terms of where he fits in the rankings, I think he probably comes in 6 or 7, and I think we may see Pedro drop to 7 or 8 maybe. But with the rankings, we've all experienced over the years that sometimes they're incredibly mad and so wide. But he's set himself up he's probably 2 fights away from a title, to be honest.
Well, I think that was the best thing. Obviously, Dana came around and pretty much said that Sterling will fight for the title. Thank God, because he deserved that so much. So that puts him up against Petr Yan. And he also came out and said that Frankie Edgar still needs to do some work, whether it's 1 victory or 2. We don't know. Obviously, it depends on where he ranks this week, of course. But a win against someone like Sancho, Cody Garbrandt knocked out incredibly. You see where that's propelled him to after a tricky period. A win over Sancho, Jose Aldo, who's a legend, Dominic Cruz is a legend. A win against those sort of people would really put him up there.
It would. And I think that's the main reason for him moving down, wasn't it? I think he wants one last run at a title. He wants one last run to capture that UFC gold again. It's been a while since he's had his hands on a belt. So I think he needs to have a big say in who he fights, because the UFC could put him against someone like Corey Sandhagen, who obviously it was meant to happen before, and I think at the time the general consensus was that would have been stylistically a matchup, but was not good for Frankie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that he needs to kind of put his ideas across as well when it comes to matchmaking meetings. I know obviously it's a case of the UFC offer you a fight and you take it or you don't, but I think if he can pick carefully, I think he does have a beating of some of the bantamweights towards the top. There's not many of them, but I think he does have a beating, so he needs to pick carefully. But if he does pick carefully, he can be right in that title mix straight away.
Yeah, and he's probably got enough money in the bank with the UFC to almost be like, they come up to him and say, right, you've got these three options. Which one do you almost want yourself, really? Is it a legend fight against the Jose Aldo or Dominic Cruz? Or do you want someone who's coming up in a young stud like Sandhagen, of course? Now, I sort of compare this to the middleweight division, because we've got obviously Chris Weidman coming back off the win. We've got Luke Rockhold looking to come back, and of course Anderson Silva's returning. And it's almost like I don't want to see the old guards being mixed with the new blood in terms of Darren Silva, Jack Manson, Whitaker, Adesanya. I almost want them to have their own mini tournament between them. And I'd like to say with Frankie Edgar, who's 38, but again, we've seen the likes of Glover Teixeira in the light heavyweight division come back, get a good win, and then being talked about potentially getting a title shot again in those latter years. Same with Frankie Edgar. It's a bit different in terms of these are on the tail end of their career, but we talk about them in a very different light.
Yeah, we do. As a community, we all we're the first to kind of jump on a fighter's back if they're edging towards the end of their career. And we all kind of sit here, and obviously it's easy for us to say, but we kind of sit here and question, do they still have it? And as you mentioned with Glover as well, you look at Junior Dos Santos as well, who's creeping up into age as well. The Doom is another one. There's so many older guys, and there's been a few very, very good performances. That one against Anthony Smith from Glover Teixeira was probably the highlight and one of the standout performances of the year for me so far. So Frankie knows this is his last shot. He's a smart man. He knows what he's getting himself into, but I don't think he's got too long left. So it's a case of weighing up: do I want to go through quick, or do I want to take my time and make my way to the title? So he's got a decision to make, but I'm sure he'll make the right one.
Yeah, he's probably got about 2 years left. Once you get to the market, can be you might, some people go on 30, 42, 44, like a Yoel Romero and Anderson Silva. Some look good. Some, you almost wish they'd stopped at 40, like Daniel Cormier said. His plan was to get to 40. He got to 41 and retired. As far as we know, he's going to be fully retired forever. But we look at the stats, of course. Munhoz, 106 strikes. He actually outlanded him there. But, it's very close to that, as you said. I did give it 3-2. I saw it 3-2 either way. I gave it to Edgar in the end. But, 4-1 for me was a little lenient on Munhoz's fight. Or Munhoz's side, let's say. But, 2 takedowns for Edgar. What are you looking there? And, did the fight play out as you expected it to?
Not necessarily, because we both predicted Munhoz would kind of just have too much in the end, maybe Frankie. But you look at those stats there, and the one thing that stands out to me instantly is the volume that these two guys have thrown. 363 attempted strikes for Frankie. We're looking at 350 for Pedro Munhoz. And it's the same with significant strikes as well. It's there as well. So I think if you mix in those 2 takedowns that are there as well, that might have been the reason why Frankie was favoured when it comes to a judge's scorecards. But, for a 38-year-old to be attempting 363 strikes is really, really good. And we mentioned it with Pedro bringing out a dog in both men, and stylistically, it ended up being a better fight than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, 100%. I think Edgar used his experience a little bit more, being 30 years old, going through those wars at lightweight and featherweight. He almost used that to his advantage. And, there was a couple of times where his leg was being kicked out from underneath him by Munhoz, and he just ate it and continued. And I think that was going on in the first and second round. I saw a lot of people almost going at Sean O'Malley, going like, that's how you deal with the leg kicks and that's how you grit through it. But, different fighters, different mentalities. And Sean O'Malley, of course, is a fighter in his own sense. It's on the rise very much. So, and Edgar's been, Sean O'Malley's going to go through what Edgar's been through and pick up their experience. But Edgar, it's nice to see him in the bantamweight division. Obviously, we saw Jose Aldo come down, and there's almost the Jose Aldo's over the hill too, and even then because he's on back-to-back losses, despite everyone saying he won against Marlon Moraes. There's very different moods between the two, even though they've had very similar fights and trajectories in that bantamweight division.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Jose Aldo, obviously he was the king at 45 for so long until the young blood Max Holloway kind of come in and just took over, and I can see why people would favour doing that fight between Edgar and Aldo. It's two veterans, big challenge in terms of moving down a weight as well. So, I mean, look, like Frankie's already fought Jose twice, I think it is, and he's lost both of them. So you do have to be careful. I think the narrative could maybe be spun that this is in a different weight class, so maybe it's warranted for a third fight. But for me, like as I said, I think you run that back with Corey Sandhagen, and let's just see where Frankie Edgar fits into his top 5.
You're 100%. I totally agree with that. We move on to the one that opened the main card. Obviously, with Dwight Grant versus Daniel Rodriguez. There was a lot of questions to this one. Obviously, Grant came out of the gates immediately, put Rodriguez down, and the referee continued it. And then, a couple of minutes later, it was the other way around, and the referee ended it pretty quickly. What did you make of that? Was it half a dozen, one or the other? The fact that, Dwight Grant probably took a lot more damage. Rodriguez scored 3 knockdowns in the official scorecard. It's a difficult one to play, but I think people are saying you can't end it for him that soon and give him that amount of spare time to almost recover.
Yeah, I think I can see both sides of the argument. Watching that fight and Dwight Grant started so quickly, and we mentioned before on a preview, hadn't we, that they hadn't had time to prepare for each other because of the short notice. So I think it was always going to be that sort of fight, the sort of firefight that it was, and as he said, he put him down a fair few times, and Rodriguez looked completely out of it. But we saw so many great comebacks in the UFC over the years, and I'm not saying this is one of the best ones, but it's definitely one of the ones that, in recent memory, that have been really good. And as I said, you can definitely see the argument for it maybe should have been stopped when Dwight Grant was dropping Rodriguez. But I think the referee did a relatively good job there. He kind of just let it play out. Dwight Grant, I think, got tired, got complacent, and kind of just started throwing, leaving his chin exposed. And, as we saw with Daniel Rodriguez in his UFC career, albeit how short it's been, when he hits you, you're going down. And the thing I love about fighting in the Apex is the reactions you get after the fight. Like, you saw how much it meant to him, and you heard the scream. So for as long as it lasted, like 2.5 minutes, I think it was a fantastic fight, and it was definitely probably one of the fights of the night, but it just got edged out by the main event.
Yeah, definitely. We'll just take a quick look at these stats. As you said, only 15 strikes from Rodriguez, 31 for Grant. He put out a lot of volume. He got that, he came out of the gates, and as you said, it's probably, with the lack of knowledge and the lack of ability to learn your opponent before a fight, he probably kept out and said, right, I'm going to give this my all for the first minute 30 and try and get out there quickly. But, Rodriguez came back from that, and as you can see, he landed the more lethal blows despite not landing as many.
Yeah. I think when it comes to short notice fights, but obviously this was very, very short notice. It was a matter of hours, really. So I think it was always going to be a fight where for the first minute, maybe you might get the two men sort of like in like a chess match, but that wasn't the case at all. They both come out firing. Obviously, Dwight started to better, but I think that Daniel Rodriguez overruled in the fight for as long as it went on. I thought, just showed a little bit more. I felt like Dwight Grant was maybe too eager for the finish. I think maybe a little bit of anger was inside him because of the fight dropping out. So you can definitely appreciate it. But I thought it was a great fight.
Yeah, it's almost like he probably thought, especially when he was fighting with Hector, he thought, I've done all this camp for no reason. He's probably very angry, as you said, and he's probably come in and gone, if I get a good knockout here, I'm probably in for a shout with 50 grand, and it makes your weekend a little bit sweeter.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was probably on his mind, because, look, I mean, he got paid either way, and that 50K would have been nice, and, everyone goes for that 50K. So I think that was what his mindset was going in. But I said, you go in against someone like Rodriguez, and you can't just stand there and bang, because if he connects, you're going down.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be interesting where both those go. I think it's Rodriguez. Is it the first time he's won 2 in a row in the UFC? Or was he bounced back off a loss?
Rodriguez, I think it is. And I think he's won 3 in a row now.
3 in a row. So, he's putting a good resume behind him, getting a bit of steam behind his career. And hopefully, maybe tomorrow he might want to verge that top 15 rather than the top 20. And we might, see him in his next bout. He said he wants to fight twice again, I think, this year. Because obviously, he tied for 3 fights in his rookie year for this year. He's only the 3rd fight to do it. So it's kind of impressive what he's done and, the amount of work he's been able to turn around this year, despite all the, the conditions we've been in recently.
I think that's what he's got to be careful of, though, as well, is that obviously, the company and Dana White love fighters that kind of win emphatically and then kind of say they want to fight next week.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's looked upon and it's looked upon very well. But, as you said, he's probably just outside that top 15 now. Like maybe one more fight against maybe someone like 13th, 14th, 15th, maybe, and he might find his way in there. So I think that when you're just starting in UFC, I think you can get away with taking like 4 or 5 fights a year, but he's getting to the stage now in his UFC career where he needs to, take time between each fight to improve and to have a full camp, because with this that's going on at the minute, like there's not really much chance for a full proper camp. So he has got to be careful, but he looked phenomenal on the weekend, so I won't put it past him to come back in.
Definitely. I think someone who's almost been a victim to their own success was Maria Adjapova, of course. Looked great in that first round, but she tired herself out. Having, she had 3 wins back-to-back, all ended in the first round. She'd probably gone in there a little, maybe overconfident, overzealous, and it was a quick turnaround from, I think, June or July she made a UFC debut. Reese, what did you make of the first round? Fantastic. Second round, not so.
She come out like a sting train, didn't she? She come out and she was throwing everything at Shayna Dobson, and despite the volume there, she didn't really land anything that was kind of made you sit back in your seat. It was kind of like pressure strikes that were the most impressive, but she had a massive adrenaline dump. She, at the end of that first, she was breathing so heavily on the stall while you look across the cage and Shayna Dobson's there and she's just breathing so zen-like. It was ridiculous. And we criticised Shayna's record and saying that she had to win this fight, but the experience that she had, even though that Agapova's got more fights, that experience in the UFC is crucial and it's so critical. And I think that kind of proved in the end. But I think now there's a blueprint and a game plan to beat Agapova. You get out that first round, she's going to be tired. You've got a great chance to go ahead and do it. So props to Shayna Dobson. She was really, really impressive.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, Ajapova's over at ATT. So she's got a good camp behind her. The fact that maybe, it's her first 2 UFC fights, whether she's almost been overhauled by the occasion, it's been a little bit too much for her. She wants to go out there, get that 50K bonus, get a good highlight reel and really progress through her career. And the fact that she's had so much success before that in terms of getting first round early finishes, it's interesting whether maybe confidence was a bit too much, fighting on ESPN, UFC, although she's a very experienced fighter. Fighters can have a different mentality to the occasion, can't they?
I think it does. The one thing I weren't a fan of in the lead-up was she was quite openly calling out Tracy Cortez. Obviously, Tracy beat her in the Contender Series back last year. Mm-hmm. But for me, when fighters do that, I'm not a fan of it. Like, at the end of the day, focus on the person that's in front of you. If you come out of that and you come out unscathed as well, especially, then you can go all guns blazing on calling people out. But I felt like she's already looking through Dobson, and I think that also was a reason why she come out so quick, because she knew she could finish her. But obviously that wasn't to be the case. But I think she needed to focus on her opponent in front of her, and maybe the stature of the event and where she was on the card, maybe it did get to her. Maybe that would play a part in the adrenaline dump. We don't know, but she needs to work on that cardio. She needs to work on being explosive, but only at the right time, because she failed to do that on the weekend.
Yeah, obviously she's only 23 years old, so she's still very young. Albeit she's now 9-2, so she's 11 fights, which is a lot for a 23-year-old. She's got a lot of experience behind her. But take a quick look at the stats again. 2 takedowns each. As you said there, her volume in that first round was incredible. But Shayna Dobson, she weathered the storm and came back very strong in that second round.
She did, and I think those stats are quite telling as well. Agapova didn't really land anything in the second round, I don't think. So in the end, the stats even themselves out. But to be fair, like, effectively getting 60 out of your 90 strikes is so impressive. But when you look on the side of Dobson as well, and she got effectively 40 out of 60 of hers. So the strikes were very, 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 very effective from both women, and 2 takedowns each as well. Obviously, when Agapova's toe and the takedowns are there for Dobson, they presented themselves and she took it, and she really made her pay on the floor.
Yeah, definitely. And we saw against her debut win against Tanner Sliders, of course. She came out like a freight train in that first round, and luckily, she got the better of the fight that night, and she got the win, and very impressively so. So it's gonna be interesting. Hopefully, it takes a month or two, maybe up to 6 months off. Gets up work in the gym. She's got a great team around her. Valerie Lareda's in that gym, of course. You've got Yoni and Jacek's there, so she's got an array of talent and experience there to really learn from it. Only 23 years of age, she's got a whole career ahead of her still, and the work she's put on so far and the wins that she's had. She's got a good 23.
Yeah. You mentioned the names of some of the people in that gym, and men and women in that gym, is insane. So I think she needs to go back to drawing board. She needs to lean on the support of some of those fighters, especially the likes of Yoni and Jacek. We all know the pedigree that she's got. She's, in the top 5 of one of the best women's fighters of all time. She's in that discussion. But she needs to lean on those sorts of people. She needs to, as I said before, she needs to learn when to be explosive, because she kind of just used it all in the opening 2-3 minutes, and it really did cost her. But go back, recoup, as you said, take a few months off, maybe fight towards the end of the year. And yeah, but as you said, she's 23 years old, so she's got a long way ahead of her still.
Yeah, definitely. And Valerie Lareda's a hot prospect coming up through Bellator, 21 years of age. They're probably going to follow each other. They're very closely aged together, so they're only going to get better fight, competing with each other in the gym. And maybe later on down the line, we'll see them cross over paths in the competition side, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe. There's a lot of good prospects in that gym as well. Whether you sign to Bellator or whether you sign to UFC or whatever organisation you sign to, there's a lot of talent in there. So they're only going to bring the best out of each other, and definitely. I think that's what she needs to do. Definitely.
Now, you mentioned there the amount of strikes. Have a good guess. I think it was 56 she landed. Have a good guess at how many was laid in that first round.
Probably say 56 of them.
Close, 53.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah,
strikes landed came in that first round. That's incredible, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, she just didn't have any offense in that second round whatsoever. I think to be fair, that whole round consisted of Agapova being on her back and Dobson being on top. So the fact that 53 of those 56 were in the first round doesn't. To be fair, a lot of those were probably in the first 2.5 minutes as well, because she kind of tired towards the end of that first round a little bit. But that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, maybe it was a little bit, as you said, if she's not respecting the opponent. I imagine she does, but maybe subconsciously she's probably looking ahead, going, this girl's not yet won in the UFC. It can be easy to look past her. You've seen it, many times in boxing when people are looking at AJ going, oh, it's going to beat Ruiz, and then we get the fight against Deontay Wilder. It doesn't go like that sometimes. And even now, Dylan White, of course, last Saturday night, should we say, was supposed to beat Povetkin and go on and face Tyson Fury. It doesn't happen like that in sport.
Yeah, you've got to be really careful, especially with boxing and MMA. You can't underestimate anyone. Obviously, it's a different story when it comes to the heavyweight side of things, but in an MMA fight, we've saw everything over the years of watching this sport. Anything can happen at any time, from Anderson Silva kicking legs and breaking his own leg, to even just like we saw with Sean O'Malley and the injury he had. Anything can happen at any time. So I know it's hard, especially when you're so young, but you got to be prepared for every single situation that could possibly arise.
Yeah, definitely. I think Anderson Silva's the perfect one. 1 minute he's getting his leg broken, crucially, in Chris Weidman. The other side is he submits Charles Sullivan with minutes to go after losing pretty much the whole fight. You can't. There's no certainties in sport, and definitely no certainties in MMA, especially with how many disciplines there are. You can be submitted 1 second, get knocked out the next. And as you said, Sean O'Malley was one that came through that, and he was on the back end of that, and as was Agapova, and hopefully both of them very young fighters come through, learn from it, and we see them go into 2021 as maybe 2 of the hottest prospects in the game.
Yeah, hopefully. I think it's important now for their next fight how they bounce back. Obviously, Sean O'Malley is a little bit higher up the ladder than what Agapova is, but it's really, really important now. They've got to come back. They've got to make a statement. They've got to show that they're still relevant almost. So it's going to be an important matchup for him next.
Definitely. Now, before we do sign off, who's your fight of the week this weekend?
My fight of the week is actually going to be Shayna Dobson. She was by far. I think she was
biggest underdog, weren't she?
She was by far the biggest underdog. I think she was like
against Ronda Rousey. She was the biggest underdog, I believe.
It was insane, and after she won the fight, she was in the camera's face, screaming underdog and woofing almost. So I mean, as a fighter, I can't imagine. But I say I can't imagine. I can imagine that when you're such an underdog, and the media and the whole MMA community is giving you no chance whatsoever to then go in and to not even just like get a split decision or unanimous decision, to TKO your opponent who was so thought upon. I think that was incredible. And for me, out of the entire card, she was the one who not necessarily impressed me the most, but in terms of the whole performance and the situation, she was definitely the fighter of the card for me.
Definitely. And obviously, we'll look ahead towards Smith versus Records. We've also got Contender Series again tomorrow night, of course, on ESPN. Probably going to see a couple of contracts handed out again. We're also going to be doing an MMA debate this Wednesday. It'll be out. Obviously, Dana White and Scott Coker, UFC versus Bellator. There's been a lot of talk about who's got the best light heavyweight division, who's got the best fighters. So we're going to be doing a debate on that. So, of course, make sure to drop the like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. And we'll see you guys on the next video.